November 8, 1974, a parking lot in Utah. An 18-year-old woman escapes from a car. The man who tried to abduct her has already killed at least 5 people. He'll kill 25 more before police departments in 6 different states realize they're hunting the same person. This isn't a story about a monster. It's a story about the systems that let him hunt for years after he could have been stopped. I'm Serial Killer Profile, and this 30-minute investigation will show you exactly where the system broke and why we're still vulnerable today. But first, a content warning. This case involves the murder of young women and 1 child in the 1970s. We won't show graphic content, but please take care of yourself. If you value true crime that centers victims and examines systems instead of glorifying violence, hit subscribe. We do this differently here. Let's begin. January 1974. The University of Washington campus in Seattle is alive with students returning from winter break. Among them is Linda Ann Healy, a 21-year-old psychology major with careful handwriting in her textbook margins and a part-time job as a radio announcer for ski reports. She'd wake up at 5:30 a.m. to record conditions for local skiers. Her roommates remember her laugh, her precision, the way she organized her records alphabetically. And before we go further, that woman you saw in the opening? Carol DaRonch. In about 12 minutes, I'm going to tell you how her 15 minutes of terror became the key that cracked this entire case open. Remember her name. But first, we need to understand what investigators were facing in 1974. These details matter because Linda mattered, not as a symbol, not as a statistic, as a person who lived a full, if too brief, life. She wasn't the first to disappear that year, and she wouldn't be the last. Across Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, young women were vanishing. College students mostly, last seen on campus, near campus, or in areas where students frequented. But in 1974, there was no centralized system to connect these cases, no national database, no way for detectives in Seattle to know what detectives in Salt Lake City were investigating. The 1970s represented a particular moment in American culture. Women were attending college in greater numbers, living independently, moving freely through public spaces in ways that previous generations hadn't. This freedom was hard-won and relatively new, and the systems meant to protect people hadn't caught up to this reality. Campus security was minimal. Most universities had no escort services, no emergency phones, no safety protocols. The prevailing attitude was that campuses were safe spaces by nature. They weren't. Donna Manson disappeared from Evergreen State College in March 1974. Susan Rancourt from Central Washington State College in April. Roberta Kathleen Parks from Oregon State in May. Each young woman had plans. Donna was heading to a jazz concert. Susan was walking to her dorm after a film. Kathy was leaving campus to visit friends. Ordinary moments. Interrupted. Their families did what families do. They called police. They made posters. They searched. They waited by phones that didn't ring with good news. And across state lines, a pattern was forming that no one could see yet. Coming up, the day everything changed. 1 park, 2 disappearances, and finally, witnesses who could describe exactly what was happening. Stay with me. July 14, 1974. Lake Sammamish State Park in Washington. A beautiful summer day. Thousands of people enjoying the sun. Janice Ott, 23, arrives on her bike. Hours later, she's gone. Her bike is left behind. That same day, Denise Nasland, 19, disappears from the same park. But this time, there are witnesses. Multiple people report seeing a young man with his arm in a sling, asking women for help loading a sailboat onto his car. He said his name was Ted. This is where the investigation truly begins, not with the crime itself, which we won't recreate, but with the painstaking detective work that followed. Seattle detective Robert Keppel coordinates with multiple agencies. They're receiving tips, descriptions, a name that keeps appearing, Ted. But Ted is a common name, and the description, a handsome young man, well-spoken, arm in a sling, could be thousands of people. Here's the systemic problem. Each police department was working their own cases. Seattle PD had their missing women. Utah had theirs. Oregon had theirs. The reports were filed separately, stored separately. There was no way to search across state databases because those databases didn't exist yet. Information that could have revealed a pattern remained siloed, not because investigators weren't capable, but because the infrastructure to connect crimes across jurisdictions simply wasn't there. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles south in Utah, something crucial happened that would eventually crack the case wide open. November 8, 1974. Carol DaRonch, 18, is at a shopping mall in Murray, Utah. A man approaches her claiming to be a police officer, says someone tried to break into her car, needs her to come with him to make a report. She's scared, confused. He seems official, authoritative. She gets in his car. What happens next is an attempted abduction. He tries to handcuff her. She fights back. She escapes. Carol DaRonch survives, and critically, she can identify her attacker. She can describe his car, his appearance, his methods. Later that same night, a drama teacher at a nearby high school reports a man lurking near the venue where students are performing. He matches the description Carol gave. This is the nature of patterns in serial violence. They're only visible in aggregate. One case looks like an isolated incident. 10 cases across 5 states look like an epidemic. But you need systems that can see all 10 cases at once. It would take time, but investigators were building that picture manually, sharing information through phone calls, mailed reports, personal relationships between departments. One detective's hunch leading to another detective's case file. A deep voice keeps surfacing across these investigations. Tips from different people who don't know each other in different states, pointing to the same person. Theodore Robert Bundy. Now, many of you probably searched, how was Ted Bundy caught to get here? And the answer might surprise you. It wasn't criminal profiling. It wasn't brilliant detective work at first. It wasn't DNA or advanced forensics. It was a traffic stop and a survivor who refused to be silenced. The next section of this investigation shows you exactly how that happened, and it's the most important part of this entire story. Before we continue to Carol's story, if you think survivors like her deserve to be remembered more than the people who hurt them, hit that like button. It tells YouTube to recommend this to people who value ethical true crime. And if you want to support the 40+ hours of research that goes into investigations like this, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Now let's talk about how one woman's courage changed everything. This is Carol DaRonch. Everything you're about to hear in the next 6 minutes exists because she fought back. Here's what happened. August 1975. Utah Highway Patrol Officer Bob Hayward is on routine patrol when he notices a Volkswagen Beetle driving suspiciously in a residential area at 2:30 a.m. He tries to pull it over. The car speeds away, then stops. The driver identifies himself as Theodore Bundy. In his car, police find handcuffs, an ice pick, a crowbar, garbage bags, a mask made from pantyhose. He's arrested for evading police, but it's what happens next that matters. Detective Jerry Thompson in Salt Lake City has been investigating disappearances. He has Carol DaRonch's description, he has reports from other agencies, and now he has a suspect in custody. Carol DaRonch picks Theodore Bundy out of a lineup. In March 1976, Bundy is convicted of aggravated kidnapping in the DaRonch case. He receives a sentence of 1 to 15 years. But investigators know this is bigger than one attempted abduction. They're building cases linking him to multiple murders across state lines. Physical evidence begins to tell a story. Tire tracks matching his vehicle, witness descriptions, credit card receipts placing him in different states when women disappeared. He'd lived in Seattle, where women vanished from the University of Washington. He'd moved to Utah for law school, where women vanished around Salt Lake City and surrounding areas. He traveled to Colorado, where more women vanished. The geography of his life mapped perfectly onto the geography of disappearances. Now you might be wondering, why couldn't police see this pattern earlier? What made this case different from other serial investigations of that era? The answer reveals everything wrong with the system at that time. In 1976, if a detective in Seattle wanted to know if their murder matched a pattern in Utah, they had to 1. Personally know a detective in Utah, 2. Call them on the phone, 3. Describe their case verbally, 4. Hope the other detective remembered similar details, 5. Mail physical files back and forth. There was no database, no searchable records, no way to say, show me all cases involving women aged 18 to 25, college students, disappeared near campuses. The tool that could have stopped this in 1974 wouldn't exist until 1985. That's 11 years too late. And that delay cost lives. I want to pause on something critical here. We're not telling this story to understand him. We're telling it to understand the systems that failed to stop him sooner. He wasn't exceptional. He wasn't uniquely charming or brilliant. What he was opportunistic. He exploited trust, exploited the gaps between jurisdictions, exploited a moment when women's freedom of movement had expanded, but protective infrastructure hadn't kept pace. He would approach women appearing to need help, with his arm in a sling, with crutches, asking for assistance. Social norms of politeness, of helping someone who appears vulnerable, became the very thing he weaponized. This wasn't charisma, it was manipulation of social expectations. By late 1976, authorities in multiple states want to question him about unsolved murders. He's transferred to Colorado to face charges in the murder of Karen Campbell. But the system has another failure point waiting to happen. June 7, 1977. Bundy is allowed to visit the courthouse library for research. He's preparing his own defense, representing himself. He jumps from a second-story window and escapes. He's captured 6 days later. December 30th, 1977. He escapes again, this time from his jail cell in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. This escape is more carefully planned. He loses weight, saws through the ceiling, crawls through ductwork. This time, he makes it out of the state. These escapes weren't inevitable. They represented specific institutional failures, decisions about security levels, supervision, courtroom access. Each decision seemed reasonable in isolation, but created cascading vulnerability. The question that haunts investigators: could tighter protocols have prevented what came next? Because what came next was Florida. What happens next is the hardest part of this story to tell, not because of the violence, which we won't describe, but because of what it reveals about how many chances the system had to prevent it. If you can, stay with me through this section, because the failures here directly led to the changes that protect people today. January 15, 1978. The Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. In the early morning hours, two young women, Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, are killed. Two others are brutally attacked but survived. Margaret was 21, a junior majoring in art history. Lisa was 20, studying fashion merchandistry. They had sorority sisters who loved them, families waiting for them to come home for spring break, futures ahead of them. Less than a month later, on February 9th, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach disappears from her middle school in Lake City, Florida. Her body is found 8 weeks later. Kimberly was in 7th grade. She loved gymnastics. She was weeks away from her 13th birthday. This is a child. Theodore Bundy is arrested in Pensacola, Florida on February 15, 1978, driving a stolen vehicle using stolen credit cards. The violence stops. The trials that follow in 1979 and 1980 become a national spectacle. They're among the first trials televised nationally, and they expose the American public to courtroom proceedings in unprecedented ways. The prosecution builds its case meticulously. Witnesses testify, evidence is presented, including bite mark analysis, which was accepted forensic science at the time, but has since been thoroughly discredited as unreliable. That matters. The forensic standards of 1979 aren't the standards we hold today. Science evolves. Our understanding of evidence reliability evolves. But there was other evidence: witness accounts placing him at the scene, fibers matching his clothing, victim testimonies from survivors, stolen credit card records, and perhaps most powerful, the testimony of those who survived and could identify him. July 23, 1979. Theodore Bundy is convicted of the Chi Omega murders. February 10, 1980, he's convicted of murdering Kimberly Leach. He receives 3 death sentences. The families of victims sit through trials. They hear details no parent, no sibling, no friend should have to hear. They watch him represent himself, cross-examine witnesses, perform for cameras. The courtroom gives them a verdict. It doesn't give them back what was taken. For the next decade, appeals proceed through the court system. Each appeal forces families to relive trauma. Each denial brings them one step closer to closure, if such a thing exists. The death penalty itself remains controversial, a debate about justice, morality, efficacy. We're not here to argue for or against it. We're here to acknowledge that even its most fervent supporters would agree, no execution brings back the dead. Justice, when it comes, is always incomplete. In the next 4 minutes, I'm going to show you what actually changed after these failures were exposed, and what still hasn't changed enough. This is the part that matters most for today. If this system-focused approach to true crime resonates with you, if you think we should spend more time examining why violence happens than celebrating how it was caught, Please share this video and let me know in the comments which system failure shocked you most: the lack of databases, the escape protocols, campus security? Your answer helps me understand what topics to investigate next. January 24th, 1989. Theodore Bundy is executed in Florida. The crowds outside celebrate. The families inside the prison witness. The world moves on. But for those directly impacted, the story doesn't end. Carol DaRonch, who fought back and survived, has lived her life with privacy and dignity. She chose not to become a public figure, and that choice deserves respect. Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, who survived the Chi Omega attack, have shared their stories publicly in recent years, on their terms, in their time. The systemic failures exposed by this case led to real changes. In 1985, the FBI launched VICAP, the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, a national database allowing law enforcement to identify patterns across jurisdictions, the very thing that could have connected cases years earlier. Universities nationwide implemented escort services, emergency phone systems, lighting improvements, and comprehensive safety protocols. Victim services programs expanded. Victim impact statements became standard in sentencing. Support systems for families improved. But let's be honest about what hasn't changed enough. Women are still told to modify their behavior to stay safe. Don't walk alone. Don't drink too much. Watch your surroundings. The burden of prevention still falls disproportionately on potential victims rather than potential perpetrators. Violence against women remains epidemic. College campuses are still sites of vulnerability. The systems we've built are better than they were, but not good enough. The families of those killed have lived decades without their daughters, their sisters, their friends. Some have become advocates. Others have chosen private grief. Both responses are valid. Scholarships exist in victims' names. Advocacy organizations continue their work. Every prevention success is a victory, even as it can never undo what was lost. Here's what I want you to take from this story. Not the name of the person who killed, not the details of violence, not fascination with evil. Take this: systems matter. Infrastructure matters. How we respond to warning signs matters. How we believe survivors matters. How we allocate resources to prevention matters. Take this: these were whole people with whole lives. Linda Ann Healy, Donna Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Kathleen Parks, Janice Ott, Denise Nasland, Margaret Bowman, Lisa Levy, Kimberly Leach, and so many others whose names we don't know with certainty, but whose absences are felt by people who loved them. The weight of absence is heavy. It's carried by families, by survivors, by communities. The least we can do is bear witness responsibly. Here's what I need you to remember from this investigation. Systems matter more than psychology. Infrastructure matters more than evil. Prevention matters more than punishment. If you or someone you know needs support, these resources are in the description and pinned in the comments. RAIN, 1-800-656-HOPE. National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-SAFE. Crisis Text Line, text HOME to 741-741. 3 things before you go. First, next week I'm investigating Dennis Rader, BTK, the letters that gave him away. Click to get notified when it drops. Second, if you want more system-focused true crime, check out all my videos. Third, subscribe if you're done with exploitative true crime. We do this differently here, and your support makes it possible. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves and each other.